Hello everybody, I am Jared Ross, the Geni Vlogger, and welcome back to another video where I answer your genealogy and DNA test questions. As always, if you have a question that you'd like me to answer, be sure to go to my subreddit, r/GeniVlogger, and post your question there. I think I say this in almost every video now, but it is a very long list tracing back to over a year at this point, so it takes me a while to get to these questions because there's a lot of them. But let's jump into it. Weird DNA results across 4 companies. I'm a mixed person from a white European mother and an unknown father, but matches suggest he was Hispanic. My mom was born in Pennsylvania. Her side of the family has been there since at least the late 1700s, to parents of British Isles and French-German ancestry, maiden names like Gillespie, Hess, and Zoot. I've done DNA tests with all 4 major companies, 23andMe, MyHeritage, Ancestry, and Family Tree DNA, and have some weird results. The results showed similar amounts of about 75 to 85% European and 10 to 12% Mesoamerican indigenous Mexico across all 4 companies. Where things got weird were the remaining parents. Okay, so 23andMe, 3.8% West Asian, Middle Eastern, North African, and 1.1% Sub-Saharan African. So both we're looking at trace results. By trace results, I'm meaning that they're just small percentages, and because they're small percentages, the confidence that they're true is much lower. So there's a higher possibility that they're what's known as a false positive. Basically, it's a reading you're getting that might not be true. But let's see what the other companies say. So Ancestry, 1% North African, 1% Sub-Saharan Africa. Family Tree DNA, 1% Middle Eastern, but no African. And then MyHeritage, 6.5% North African and 1.2% Sub-Saharan African, and then you list Nigerian. Now there's one thing to consider. Ancestry gave me 9% Spain, while FTDNA gave me 28% Iberian. The other companies gave me much less or none. How much could actually be of Iberian descent? Are people from Mexico or Spain part North African, Arab, or Middle Eastern? If so, why would those regions be represented in such a large range, 1% to 6.5%? Different reference populations for each company? Who would be the most reliable or accurate for ethnic estimates from that region? Now, to start out with the slight differences between the 4 companies in terms of the African readings, which you're basically looking at the North African and then the Sub-Saharan African, they all are varying, and they could be explained through that Iberian. And then looking at the fact that you are getting Iberian from Ancestry and Family Tree DNA, although very different percentages, it could be somewhat true, but it's hard to tell how much could actually be of Iberian descent. Now, going off of just the admixture, there is a possibility that there might not be any Iberian in your ancestry. Now, if you look at your DNA matches and you're seeing a lot of people with Iberian ancestry, it's very possible. And seemingly like you have Mexican ancestry, it's pretty much very, very likely that you do have some sort of Iberian ancestry, whether it be somewhat recent or hundreds of years back. But then jumping to your question about are people from Mexico or Spain part of North African, Arab, or Middle Eastern? And the answer is actually yes. There is a long historical connection between the populations of Iberia and the populations of North Africa and the Middle East. Most notably in the fact that the Umayyad Caliphate, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, basically ruled the region for hundreds of years. I think it was the year 711, if I'm remembering that correct. Let's see, 711 Umayyad Caliphate. So yeah, so the year 711 is usually like the beginning of it. And so the Umayyad Caliphate, which we can look at this map and see, it went up through North Africa and then through Iberia, and then they conquered Spain. And then it was with the Reconquista that started happening hundreds of years later that then ended in 1492, which led to the creation of Spain as we know it today. So because of those hundreds of years of connections between these different population groups, it is not uncommon to find that in the ancestry of people with Iberian ancestry. And then for your question, why the range would vary so much from 1% to 6.5%, that has to do with a couple of different things. For one, it has to do with the way that the tests are reading your DNA. So each one of these companies is reading the DNA differently, Basically, they have all these different studies that they then go, okay, based on this study, if we find someone with this segment of DNA, we'd expect them to have this ancestry most likely. Or if we found this other type of segment, we'd say this ancestry. But on top of the differences in just how they read it and then the studies that back it up, there's also the difference of how they define the population groups, which you can see in how you have it here, although these readings are fairly similar, but you have it, West Asian, North African, then North African, then Middle Eastern, Arab Levant, and then North African. But when you look at the other parts of your results for the rest of the tests, I know you don't really go into detail here, but you'll notice that they are all defined very differently. So there's a lot of those issues. And then on top of all of that, all of these companies are also testing different markers. So that can make a difference because all of these tests are testing about 650,000, 700,000 different markers in your DNA known as SNP markers, SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms. And each one of these companies, they're all testing basically about the same. Like, now I'm pulling these numbers just out of the air, so don't quote me on this as being right, but just kind of as an example, let's say they're all testing about the same 600,000 SNPs, but then there's 50,000 that MyHeritage is testing that none of the others are testing, and then 23andMe has maybe 75,000 that they're testing that none of the others are testing, or, it could be all sorts of different numbers, but basically, all of these tests have slightly different variations of what markers they're looking at. And they're looking at hundreds of thousands, and the differences between what they're looking at, I don't know what the numbers are exactly. I guess it's at least hundreds, but I'm sure it might range into the thousands or even tens of thousands of amounts of markers that they're looking at that the other companies aren't. It's because of that same reason that when you upload your DNA from one company to another, and let's say you've already tested with the company you are uploading to. So let's say you tested through MyHeritage, and then you took an Ancestry test and then uploaded that to MyHeritage. Those two tests are going to look very different. And the main reason why they are going to look different is because each of those tests has a bunch of different markers that they're testing that the other one didn't test. And so that's going to change how they read things because they're not going to have all of the same information that they did when they did your original test that they tested through MyHeritage. Hopefully that makes sense. That was kind of a convoluted explanation. And then for your last question, who's the most reliable or accurate for ethnic estimates from that region? So I'm guessing you mean specifically North African, but maybe African in general. And in a sense, it's kind of hard to say. Part of it is because we don't have the backup information to be sure of the answer. And to be sure of the answer and to get that backup information, we would need all of these companies to release what's known as a white paper, which is basically just a scientific breakdown of where's the information coming from, where they're then coming up with these conclusions, what's the statistical analysis of it, and how can you go, from this information to them then giving you the full reading. What are they doing to get that? So a white paper breaks all of that down, and it would be through that we could then get the best idea. The main thing focusing on the recall and precision numbers, which are statistical inferences of each population group and how well they can read it. I have a whole video that I go into about it, so if you want to check that out, I'll probably be linking the link up here. I can never remember which side that's on. And this is honestly a question that I was getting a whole lot in the beginning of doing these videos, but it's kind of died down after a while because I think it's become much more known to a lot of people. But a big part of it too is that for me, I really don't care which one's more accurate or reliable because it's going to vary from person to person as well. And most importantly is that the thing that's going to help you actually learn your true ancestry, especially the stories of your ancestors, is by using your DNA matches. That's where it's going to help in expanding your actual family tree to figure out their names, their stories, or even sometimes just a better idea of where you might come from, because these tests might give you a percentage, but then when you look at your matches and you're seeing a whole bunch of your matches in a certain location, that's usually an indication that you have some sort of connection to whatever location that may be. On to the next one. Balkan DNA and Migration Part 1. Being from the Balkans, we were always taught that the Slavic people came from somewhere in Middle Asia to Eastern Europe to then diverse into South, West, and East Slavic groups, so by default I have always thought to descend from the South group of the Slavic people. I have my family tree built based on stories in my family because I cannot find any records or archives about the Balkan region. From my dad's and grandfather's side of my family, I've traced it back 6 generations, but only the males. Each of them lived in North Macedonia and stayed at the same village for generations until my grandfather decided to move. From my grandmother's side, my father's mother, I have only 2 generations back, everyone by stories being in Macedonia. From my mom's side, I don't have anything really. The farthest I have are my great-grandparents, again, all lived in North Macedonia. I was kind of surprised by my results, especially the Romanian part and all the diversity, mostly about the migration since all of my Balkan genetic groups seem to originate from the West, not from the East. Comparing the MyHeritage DNA and Family Tree DNA, they seem to cover each other briefly, but not quite much. I'm asking for more information about the migration on the Balkan and how I can get such mixed ethnicity. So this person posted their DNA results in a second post, and here we have the MyHeritage, which we see Balkan, and then it shows Romania as one of the communities. Then we get Greek and South Italian at 25.7, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, East European, Italian, Baltic, Ashkenazi, Jewish, North African, and then they also have Nigerian 1.4%. So a pretty big mix. And then they included this where they circled Romania, and then they had this. Now, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I'm guessing they're quickly asking, why does it have all this color over here in Germany and Czech Republic and Switzerland and all of that? And then Romania is over here. And it looks like group timeline, and then it shows Romania. So I'm wondering if it's talking about a specific migration that in the 1600s was in Germany, but then they migrated to Romania eventually. But I honestly don't know. This is just me guessing. Usually they have information things. So that group timeline, that little I right there, hit that, see what that says. Because I can't. And that's usually where they'll give you the information about what's going on. But that'd be my guess. But then looking at family tree DNA, because they're asking the differences. So we have 59% Greece and Balkans, 10% Iberian, 28% West Slavic, less than 2% Scandinavian, less than 2% Central European, and then less than 1% Sephardic Jewish. And so honestly, I mean, the biggest difference really is just because of the fact that they just define everything so differently. I mean, here we see Greece and Balkans. Here they just say Balkan, but then Greece is with South Italian. But then jumping back, we see Iberian Peninsula here, 10%. And then looking over here, we don't get any sort of Iberian, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever. But we do get this Irish, Scottish, and Welsh. And looking here, we don't get really much Northwestern European at all. And then we do get the West Slavic 28%, which probably correlates with this Eastern European, and then the Greek and South Italian and the part of the Balkans too. So, you know, they're just defining everything so differently. You do get a little correlation with that Sephardic Jewish, and then they're giving you a little bit of Ashkenazi Jewish. And then with MyHeritage, they're giving you that North African reading, and then you're getting that small percentage of Nigerian, whereas you're really not getting much of that at all here. Technically, the closest would be the Middle Eastern, probably. So there are definitely some curious differences between them, but that's one of the things with these tests is that they really can come out quite differently. They define things differently, so that makes a whole lot of confusion, but then there are obvious differences here. Is that it's like, you know, the Scottish, Irish, Welsh in MyHeritage obviously is not coming up at all in family tree DNA. Same with that Iberian that's not coming up in here. So maybe what's going on is whatever they're reading as Iberian over here for whatever reason, MyHeritage is thinking more Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and other things as well. Now, the way to learn about this would be to learn about the specific migration patterns into North Macedonia and out of it, and just a general history for the past 400, 500, 600 years, maybe even up to 1,000 years, and seeing what are common groups, what are common threads of migrations into the area or out of the area, or just different things that might affect how the DNA may look for people who are from North Macedonia. Now, I personally don't know. I wouldn't know if there's a massive difference between the different migrations throughout the Balkans and or specific areas in the Balkans, although I would assume that, especially being that there are the different cultural differences throughout the Balkans. So I would imagine that a lot of those cultural differences come from different ancestral backgrounds and other sorts of things that would give possible different readings in DNA. Or I guess you could say just, would show up in DNA differently. So I don't really know North Macedonia. I think it would take way too long for me to pull up pages and try to read and figure it out because I wouldn't know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm sure you can probably go on YouTube and search for videos about North Macedonian history. I don't know how in depth they might be, but that would be the way to understand maybe what is going on here better, because you are getting a whole lot of mixture here, and some of it certainly makes sense just in general idea of where the Balkans are located. So it's, kind of southeastern Europe. So because of that, you are getting the Southern European with the Italian in there. You're also getting a lot of that Eastern European. The Baltic kind of makes sense too. Did they have Baltic for your family tree DNA? Well, they had West Slavic, and technically they might even consider that Baltic. So unfortunately, there's really not that much that I can help you out with here. The one thing that I would really suggest more than anything is to try to expand your family tree. You did mention that you had a good amount built on your father's side and specifically your grandfather's side. You didn't quite have as much for the other parts of your family, but now that you have 2 DNA tests, and most especially MyHeritage, look at your DNA matches, see what you can build from that, see if you can identify anything, and you might start looking at your matches and notice a lot of specific things. They had Romania listed most likely because they noticed a lot of matches of yours that have Romania as an ancestral location. And when you find a common thread, a common location amongst a lot of your genetic matches, it's usually an indication that you have a connection there that might be an ancestral connection. And I would even say take a look into Romanian migration to Macedonia, because I know Romania and Macedonia, they're both kind of part of that Balkan collective in a sense, but they are, different areas, and there might be some sort of specific connection between them that maybe you didn't even really know about, or maybe your family connects to a very specific history that had a lot of Romanians going to Macedonia. So on to the next one. The Wikitreeers force order upon us. My Wikitree, my own private tree. It's a decent meme. I'd say it certainly makes sense. Whenever I think of Wikitree, the main thing that I really think of with Wikitreeers is that they are very ordered and very, everything must be a certain way. I kind of want to use the word bureaucratic, although it doesn't technically work here. Although there is kind of a little bit of a bureaucracy when it comes to Wikitree. So it definitely makes sense here that it's Wikitree, the nice, tight, ordered, clean, and then my own private tree, all disheveled, probably all sorts of stuff, lots of hypothesis stuff in there and all of that. Whereas Wikitree, it's nice, prim and proper. They have all the, citations down below and all of that, which, that's one of the things that does make Wikitree a great website to use. Although it doesn't make it the greatest collaborative family tree out there on the internet, although that's, something we can all argue, and obviously I've had a lot of Wikitreeers argue that, especially on my Geni video, which was my love letter to Geni, and Wikitreeers are like, why aren't you talking about Wikitree in your video about Geni? Sorry if I'm mocking you. On to the next one. Geni.com. I've been doing genealogical research for many years, but I've just decided to join the World Tree on Geni and put as many of my relatives and ancestors there as I can. I've seen in several videos how Geni works and how to use the tree, and most importantly, that it's free. However, I added ancestors very far back to where I'd be certain they would be able to connect by now. The blue hints come up, they show up in the Merge Center list, but I cannot connect them. I only end up exported to MyHeritage and asked to pay over $100 to use the features. Has the glorious and wonderful free world tree been put behind a paywall? How have I not heard about that? Well, to start out, Geni has always had a paid feature. Well, actually, I don't know if it's always, but as far back as I can remember, there was free Geni and then there was the advanced pro membership. And the way that a lot of us curators, because I'm a curator on Geni, for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically I volunteered, I applied, they reviewed my work, and then said, yes, you can be a curator, I get special access, and then I can help people on there or do other stuff to help clean up the world tree. But one of the things a lot of us curators say is that if you are using Geni and you are constantly hitting places that are saying, this is something that you have to pay for to be able to access or use this tool, then that's when you're probably going to want to actually look into paying for it. And it is a very useful tool. And I kind of get where some people are coming from in the sense of, that, this is my information that I'm supplying to this, group project in a sense, and, I shouldn't have to pay for it. But at the same time, Geni is providing a lot in terms of the storage space to be able to do that, to provide all the tools to constantly develop. They are a very small team. There's only like, it's either 7 employees or 9 employees. I can't remember right now, but it's a very, very small team based out of a small office in California. I want to say it's in San Jose, but I might be wrong with that. And, it's not like this huge company. It seems like it's a big thing because they have a lot of curators. There's like over 250 of us, but we're just volunteers. We don't get paid. The only payment we really get as volunteers is we get free Geni Pro memberships. But we also are then going around and doing a lot to help clean up the tree, to help people that have issues. And, you won't find every curator is going to be super responsive and help you with every little thing you need. But for the most part, you're always going to be able to find a curator that can step in and help you in some little way. And that's even if you don't have a Geni Pro membership. And I'm telling you right now, there's nothing for us curators that limits us on helping people whether they have a pro membership or not. We'd probably help more people without the pro memberships than anything. But this is honestly something that a lot of people for some reason have thought, and this kind of goes to the whole idea that a lot of people have when it comes to genealogy, is that everything should be free. And I know that's not necessarily what this person is saying here, although that is kind of the sentiment behind it, is how can this wonderful family tree that's hosting millions of profiles be completely free? And the honest answer is that there really isn't a whole lot necessarily limited by the paywall on Geni, although they are some of the most advanced tools. Most importantly is for the Geni Pro membership, that's what gives you the ability to then click the hints on the profile in the family tree, and then click the blue one, which then will show you other connecting family trees on Geni, and then you can do merge requests. There is a little bit of a change that happened over the years where you did get access to MyHeritage records through Geni in terms of seeing that there was a correlating record, but to then see that record, you had to have your own MyHeritage account. So you do get record hints for records that are on MyHeritage through Geni, but you have to have a MyHeritage account specifically to access that. So if you do have your own Geni Pro account, you still wouldn't necessarily be able to access every hint that you get through Geni. But that would be the same thing as when you go to Family Search and it gives you a hint in a sense of there's a record that you could look at, but it's on Ancestry.com. So if you want to see it, go to Ancestry.com and pay them. Now I know it's a little different in the fact that MyHeritage actually owns Geni, but it's still kind of the same thing because they are separate companies. It's just that they're part of like the same umbrella in a sense. But I think the biggest benefit of paying for Geni is the fact that it is one of the best collaborative tools, being a collaborative family tree. And like I said with the meme I reacted to earlier, there can certainly be an argument about which is the best. I'm in Camp Geni. I know there's a lot of people that are Camp Wikitree. There's also a whole group of people that are Camp Family Search, although in my opinion it goes Geni, Wikitree, Family Search. But like I said, we can all argue it. There's a lot of differences. The biggest difference in terms of Geni versus Wikitree and Family Search is Wikitree and Family Search are 100% free. Family Search is paid through the LDS Church. I don't know exactly how that goes. Wikitree, I believe, is through donations and a lot of that kind of stuff. They have a very big community on Wikitree that is a very tight-knit community. They have their own Discord and stuff. It's a very useful site to be on. I love Geni. It's a great website, but I'm also on Wikitree. I'm also on Family Search. I'm also on GenieNet, Ancestry, MyHeritage, all sorts of stuff. There's probably places I've put family trees that I don't even remember, and that has to do with cousin bait. Cousin bait, for those who don't know, is just the fact of putting out information on your family tree, which is then the bait, which then helps you connect with cousins. Because think about it. You do your research, you look up your second great-grandparents, you see someone else posting about them, what are you going to do? Probably try to reach out to that person, and that's what cousin bait is. So the more places you have your family tree, the better. I know I'm not really answering your question now, I'm going off on a tangent, but just wanted to throw that in there. On to the next one. Half relations DNA matches. I have two DNA matches. One is 101 centimorgans and the other is 49 centimorgans. They're first cousins to each other, born 10 years apart. I do not recognize anyone in their family trees. Could they possibly be half first cousins to me through my father's unknown paternal line? Now I'm going to jump right down to the comments here, which was done by Matt, who's actually one of the moderators here. A big shout out to Matt, my other admins and moderators on here in Discord. But he mentions that's too low centimorgan level for half first cousins. If you check DNA Painter's shared centimorgan tool, you'll see that the likelihood is they are more likely half second cousins or even half third cousins, or something else like first, second, or third cousins 2 or 3 times removed. And he's right. So we're going to go to DNA Painter. And let's see, he said 101 and 49. So what you do, you just put in here the centimorgans, 101. And it's going to tell you what is the percentage probability that it could be one of these relations. And so we have it tiered: first half second cousin once removed, half first cousin twice removed, first cousin 3 times removed, 3 cousins, all these other things. And then they have this cool table down here which gives you the further information, and then you can click on stuff to get an idea. So let's say maybe it's a third cousin. So it even shows you the histogram. It shows you here 101 centimorgans falls right here in the histogram. So that's kind of likely. It's a very possible thing that they might be a third cousin. Now, going back to the fact that you said that through your father's unknown paternal line, it very well could be through that unknown paternal line, and it might not necessarily be a half relation, might be a full relation. So if your father's paternal line is completely unknown, might be that your father's paternal grandfather had a sibling, and that sibling is the ancestor of these people. And then that would make sense, because if we go over here, so let's see, there's you, okay, then there's your grandfather, and then his grandfather would be your great-great-grandfather. Well, if we have descendants going down, could be a first cousin twice removed, second cousin once removed, third cousin once, like all of these different options. Basically, they could be that far back. So the fact that you have an unknown, let's see, was it grandparent? Yeah, father's unknown paternal line, you have an unknown grandparent. That means 25% of your family tree is completely unknown. So it's very possible that they could be through that. And one thing I should probably add in here is to just clarify what it means when it's a half relation. So a half relation is when instead of sharing a pair of ancestors, you only share a single ancestor. So the most straightforward one is a half sibling. Instead of sharing a pair of parents, a mom and a dad, you share a single parent. Either you both have the same mom or you both have the same dad. Then if you're half first cousins, instead of having a pair of grandparents that you share, you then instead only share one grandparent. So maybe let's say your grandfather had your dad, and then your grandmother passed away, he got remarried and then had another child, and then that child had a kid as well. That kid would be your half first cousin because you both have the same grandfather, but you don't have the same grandmother. And then it just keeps going further back. So for a second cousin, if they're a half second cousin, you'd only be sharing a single great grandparent instead of a pair of great grandparents. Half third cousin, you're sharing a single second great grandparent, and so on and so forth. So I do want to throw that in there because I am wondering maybe they didn't fully realize what the half relation necessarily means. Although I highly doubt that, because what they say does make sense, where it's, father's unknown paternal line. Could it be a half first cousin? So half first cousin would mean that you have one shared grandparent, which you're presumably would be the grandmother, but that definitely is not the case, and we can go and look at the table. So looking at the half first cousin histogram here, we see that at 200 centimorgans, there's 9 submissions, and granted, this is rounding, but 200 centimorgans, there's 9 submissions, but 100 centimorgans, there's 0, and you're at 101, so it's extremely, extremely unlikely. But looking at this, maybe it is possible that if your father had a half sibling, that these people descend from that half sibling. But for that to be the case, it would either have to be that you're much older or your father's much older, because it would have to be much further down. So it would either have to be a half first cousin once removed, so basically half first cousin's child, And then you're still kind of in the less likely range of things, but it's still a possibility. But then there's also the possibility that it's a half first cousin twice removed, and then that's like right in the middle of that histogram, right where you're kind of expecting it. So it certainly is possible that if your father had an unknown sibling through this unknown father of his, that they would then be a descendant of that half sibling, but they would have to either be a grandchild of that half sibling or further down related. And that's why the ages would have to really be different. I don't know what your age is. For all I know, you could be 16, you might be 76, and that would make a big difference. So if you're 76, it certainly makes a lot more sense that you would have people testing that would be the grandchildren or great grandchildren of your half aunt or uncle or whoever. But if you're 16, it certainly does not make as much sense, and then it's probably leaning more towards the third cousin stuff. So your age also plays into it, as well as the age of your matches. So if you can figure out the age of your matches, you might be able to actually get a better idea as well. But beyond just this shared Centimorgan project tool, there are a lot of different tools available online, and some that a lot of people don't really know that much about. And you can learn a whole lot about those things like Watto or the ball and chain method by checking out this video of mine right here. Thank you for watching my videos. I'm Ross, a Geni vlogger. See you in the next one. And thank you to my patrons and YouTube members.